Want help to grow your business? Download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.
Welcome to episode 4 of Family Business Matters. I'm Lloyd Russell from TCB Solutions, and with me today is Miss Kylie Wilson, Director and Solicitor at Holding Redlich. Today we're talking about governance for the family business and how that governance can work for a family business. So Kylie, give us a bit of an overview of governance and how that actually goes through the family business.
Sure, Lloyd. So when we're talking about governance in the context of family business, I mean, as you're well aware, family business as opposed to third-party standalone businesses is a fairly unique business and vehicle. So, and one of the reasons for that is that frequently in family business there's emotion, a level of emotion and attachment to the business that's not necessarily evident in other businesses. So governance is really about promoting a structure to manage some of those family issues in the context of the business. And I think that the more structured that can be, the better benefits there are for businesses moving forward, because you have a system in place to deal with common issues that arise for family that affect the business, and particularly areas where there may be dispute. You can have mechanisms in place to assist with resolving that dispute in a fashion that won't be quite so expensive and quite so beneficial for lawyers as opposed to the business.
Yeah, and you were talking about context and the context of the family, and as we know in family business, there's many parts, and they can be a shareholder but not work in the business, or they're not even a shareholder or work in the business. So how do you see the governance structures and the governance systems sort of helping with those sorts of things?
So one of the areas that governance can help in particular is, as opposed to a corporate entity where you have a constitution for your company that deals with business and a board of directors that's dealing specifically with the business. In addition to that, in the family business, there can be a lot of benefits with having a family council that can be involved to support the board, but to represent family interests with the board. And particularly also then a family, it's often called a family charter or a family constitution, as distinct from your corporate constitution, which deals with specific family-related issues and structures how the family is involved in the business. So, for example, within that family charter, there will be the overall missions and values of the business as the family sees it, and also aspects of employment of family members within the business, because that can often be a problematic issue and something that needs to be discussed with family members. And a family charter can help set some guidelines around how that discussion should happen.
Yeah, and in previous episodes we talked about the dynamics of a family and strategizing for the family, and as we've worked together, we sort of talk about those sorts of things, and having the charter is actually developed by the wider family, so they can understand that legacy the family's known for and carry that on. And
not so much as a corporate constitution, and not so much structure or business focused, but family focused. And there are a lot of issues that will affect a wider family as it impacts on the business that you won't necessarily deal with in your legal structures, which we'll talk about in another episode. And so the idea behind a family charter and regular family meetings and communication is to make sure that you've got a very long-sighted view, because a lot of these businesses are intergenerational, or at least the aim is for them to be intergenerational. So a properly planned family charter can look long-term at way more than one generation. It can be looking forward for 3 or 4 generations. Obviously then it should be something that evolves and not necessarily set in stone. It will evolve as each generation moves forward, but having that structure in place to focus on some of those family issues really does promote everyone understanding the business, understanding what the aims of the business are, and will ultimately, the aim is reduce the likelihood of larger issues and disputes arising.
And it's interesting you talked about evolving through that there, and I suppose from your perspective and your wider network that you're doing managing with is how do you see that playing out if we talked about corporate structures and or corporate governance as opposed to if we talked about the family governance and that sort of stuff, we think the next gens and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So
and
that's an interesting thing we're seeing now.
Yeah,
isn't it?
and it is quite a complex problem for family business in particular. So from a corporate level, obviously you'll see businesses have a plan in place that really the dynamics of personality, whilst it might affect the business, is largely irrelevant, because if you have a major personality issue, that person probably won't be in the business any longer. Whereas with family, obviously if you're talking about intergenerational family business, you're going to see a wide range of both personality types and different views from an intergenerational perspective. So as far as evolution of things like the family charter is concerned, the family charter itself should embed the ability of each generation to have its say within family meetings or a representative on a family council, and so the charter can evolve that way, because it's very important for a business that's intergenerational to ensure that those youth and ideas and that youthful vibrancy can have an impact on the business, particularly from a growth perspective, whilst not being too stymied by the older generation. And conversely, the older generation will require that younger generation doesn't expose the business to too much risk. So both of those generations are, for a successful family business moving forward, extremely important, and a family charter can actually help promote the right levels of input into the business from each generation as it moves forward.
And that's a very good segue into what you mentioned there earlier on as well, is that there is a third dynamic away from another business, a conventional business or a standard business, as we call it, or whatever, inside a family business. And so how do you see the play separating the business, because it's very structured under ASIC and various other instruments that we've spoken about, and we will definitely speak about in future episodes. And so how do you see that playing out, from your perspective?
Yeah, as we've talked about before, it's not always one size fits all. So it partly depends to an extent on your level of what number of family you're talking about too, because you can have smaller family businesses that literally have mum and dad and you've got the next generation coming through, and then you can have larger businesses that actually have 4 generations of family spread out between it and 15 adult family members on an existing board before it moves through to the next generation. So I think from that perspective, the idea is that on the governance side, it's important to ensure that everyone in the family can have an input. Communication's essential, and that's what that family side is about, whilst also still having, I suppose you could say, a delineation between that side and the business focus side, so that you don't end up in a situation, particularly as you get towards being larger businesses, where you have too many voices, as we say, too many cooks can spoil the broth.
Yeah.
Too many voices having an impact directly on day-to-day business decisions. So that's where you have a family council that will have representatives of multiple family groups, so that all the family groups feel they have an input onto that council, and then that council supports the board of directors at the corporate level.
And as a sort of senior advisor in that area, would you strongly advise that the chairman / facilitator of the family council be different to any of the board members? So there is, I suppose, an emphasis on delineation.
Yeah, I think it's important that the right people are picked for the right roles. So I think in any family, everyone will have a different area of skill set. But having said that, there's also the importance of educating that next generation as they come through in the business, and you may need to get external advisors in. And that's that can really promote the business moving forward for the family. So if you think that you have some real skills in your family set that can help the business, then look at how they can be educated to promote business growth going forward. And a lot of that too is about, as we keep coming back to, about communication.
Yep.
So communication in family business really is the be-all and end-all.
Yes.
Without question. And you don't want to end up in a situation where one generation, usually the younger generation, is saying what they think the older generation wants to hear as far as their involvement in the business. So communication at that family governance level can make sure that everyone feels they can be honest and open and not judged about exactly what roles they think they should play in the business, or what roles they think they can play in the business, or that they're not interested in the business at all.
And I suppose that goes back to that evolution, is actually having that communication and those structures and those systems in place to allow people to evolve, which means they can allow the business to evolve.
And in a healthy fashion.
Yes.
Too. So, because as we said at the start, one of the unique areas of family business is emotion, because all families have that. And where you have these type of governance structures in place, everyone has a very clear understanding of what the goals are, what the aims are, how communication is supposed to happen. Are there monthly meetings? Are there annual meetings? It's not something where one generation feels like to understand the business to them is like throwing a dart at a dartboard. I mean, that doesn't work, and it's not good for the business. So the more there can be that structure in place, the better your communication is going to be as the generations move forward.
And that I suppose adds that other dynamic that's very difficult to manage, but also very difficult to come into. If we talked about outside directors on the board, so they're independent directors and that sort of stuff. So as again, sort of, how do you see that playing out with the dynamics, and how would that operate inside a family business structure?
And that again comes back to being about the structure. So where you have independent directors coming in on the board, that can be extremely beneficial for the business. But it's also then important to know that the family knows they have some level of input and involvement in some of that decision making, but it shouldn't be in a way that overrides the board of directors, because they're there for a reason. They've been put in place for a reason, and that's to focus on the business. And that's where things like your family council are important. And where you have those structures set up to start with, you won't end up in those situations.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.